I'm someone who did my degree and my master's degree and my A-levels in the UK, which is what you do before you're 18. And I based my decision on what I loved to learn about, as opposed to what it was that made sense for my future. Because I really felt that if I learned to love learning, and I learned how to learn, and I got really engaged in that, then that would really expand me as a person, and my mind would be open to so many different areas other than just maybe economics or business or whatever. And if people are really interested in that, that's great. But we have to have education which really develops human beings and not test takers. So Dennis has a number of bills. As you would know, he's obviously very creative and very thoughtful and puts this legislation in. One of those pieces of legislation is about a universal pre-kindergarten, so that children from the ages 3 and upwards can have access to universal pre-K. And as part of that, it's not only about learning to read and write and do some basic math. It's about how to sing and dance and be creative and play musical instruments and do some art and learn languages and connect with the environment and really explore the world that these young people have been born into. And that's really what education system really poses to us, an opportunity for us to have the tools and the intellectual abilities and the physical abilities to really engage with our environment on a number of different levels. So that's what we see as a possibility for education. And one of the things that we also see is we need that investment. We need investment in our young people. Because yes, okay, so some people are of the opinion that we just have to teach people so that they can participate and function in a global economy. That is like economics and education for slaves. That's not what we're about. We're about a country of being about liberty, the freedom of thought, having intellectual capacity to question authority, to question government, to question what's going on. We need our children and young people to really have those abilities so that we can keep the powers that be reined in and accountable and upheld. And we can understand that we can connect with the rest of the world. We can understand that we can interact with people of different cultures, races, creeds and colours. All of those different things come about, and that awareness can come about through our education system.
Well, it's interesting that some people have called this a vanity candidacy, yet I don't see any vanity in this at all. I don't see any self-aggrandizement. So the question is, what is Dennis's basic motivation?
Dennis's basic motivation has always been service, absolutely always. And when he has been offered, in the most strenuous of circumstances, incredible corruptive influences, which could have been money, which could have meant that he was on a fast track to the presidency when he was the same age as me 30 years ago, then he's turned it down because he's been there for the people. Just as a small background, and thank you for your question, Jeff. As a small background to Dennis, he first ran for public office at the age of 20. He isn't from a family with name or money. He was the oldest of 7 children. His parents never owned a home. They lived in 21 different places by the time he was 17, including a couple of cars and some orphanages as well. And Dennis really saw, and he experienced with his own life, how it is that people struggle to make ends meet, how families struggle to provide healthcare and even just put food on the table, as his family certainly did. And when he was 20, he decided to run for council against a massive ward machine in Cleveland. And everyone said he wouldn't win, and they were actually right that time, but that's one of the only times that they have been right. He lost that election by 600 votes. And he knocked every single door, and the second time he ran, at the age of 23, he won that seat. Now, this is a ward machine that had money, power, influence, all of that. He beat them because he knocked on the doors, he talked to people, he spread the message, he listened to what people needed, and he said, you know what, if I get in, I'll represent you and I'll do everything I can for you. And you know what he did? He got in and he represented them. At the age of 23, he actually helped to write Cleveland's first Air Pollution Act. And then when he was mayor a few years later, the youngest elected mayor of a major American city, he made sure that all the industries adhered to those air standards, the air quality standards. So he's been an environmentalist right from the very beginning and made great steps to impact the process in that way. Now, I mentioned that Dennis really was offered an incredible level of corruption when he was young, when he was elected mayor. And that was when he was elected to, under the promise to save a municipally owned electrical system that they term in Cleveland as Muni-Light. And Muni-Light was already, before he was elected, had already been sold to the private utility system, which would have gained the monopoly. And he had a petition drive, stalled the sale, made sure that he got in, he was elected mayor, got in, and he sat with the bankers. And the bankers at that first meeting said to him, look, Mayor, you know, you're on a fast track to the presidency. You're the youngest elected mayor of a major city. You could do anything. Give us the electrical system and we'll give you $50 million worth of loans that you can build, you can do what you like, you can expand the city, you can expand the services, you can do everything, and everyone will love you and you will be in the White House shortly. Or, if you don't do that, then we will put the city into default on $15 million worth of loans that we know you didn't take out, but we're going to blame you anyway. And you know what Dennis said? No. He remembered his family when they were counting coins literally on the kitchen table, and he's told this story to me a number of times because it's really moving to him, and it's what the motivating force was. When his family literally were counting pennies to pay the electricity bill, he was sitting there at the age of 12 looking at them and thinking about, when he was in with this banker, thinking about what it would be like if the electricity bill was 25 or 30% more expensive, what it would have meant to his family and his community. And so he said no to the sale. He said no to that corruption. And that was the start of it. He had 3 assassination attempts. The corporate community tried to get rid of him. He had the media, the business community, the banks, 2 political parties, the Democrats and the Republicans, even though he was a Democrat, against him. But he stood fast with the American people, or with the people of Cleveland. They had elected him on that promise to save that electric system. And he lost the next election because, sure enough, the banks illegally put the city into default, because the banks had their investment. They had joint members on the board with the private utility and their own interests. And so they put the city into default, and Dennis was deemed to be a failure, having made a terrible decision, having been this young mayor that really didn't know what he was doing. But he really knew that if the public didn't own the utility system, in time the utility system would own them. And that's who really stands for the public ownership of utilities and everything like that, which is why when we look at Social Security, he was the front runner really in standing up so that we didn't privatize Social Security. Anyway, he lost his next election. He couldn't get a job. Everybody who offered him a job, he was given the job offer, then the job was pulled because the corporate community said to the companies, you employ that man and you'll never do business with us again. So Dennis was not only in the political wilderness, but also in the business wilderness as well, for about 14 years. And then Muni-Light, still publicly owned thanks to Dennis, in 1993, underwent the largest expansion of any electrical system, any publicly owned electrical system in America. And the people of Cleveland said, hold on a minute, if Dennis hadn't saved it, then we wouldn't have it. Where is he? And they also calculated that in those years, the city had saved over $200 million on utility bills. And then he was deemed the hero. And then the council gave him resolutions saying, you did the right thing, and his name was cleared, and he was called back to run for state senate. And he did, under the little slogan, because he was right. Tends to be right on lots of things. And he was the only Democrat in a state election that year to win a seat over a Republican incumbent. And he won that seat. And then, the next term, in 1996, he ran for Congress and he beat a Republican incumbent member of the House leadership. Why? Because his positions were very, very different, and because he tends to be right and the people know him. So this really goes to show Dennis as being somebody who stands with his principles and his values. He's not in it for glory, he's not in it for money, certainly not in it for money, and he's not in it for anything other than literally to have a government that really is to serve the people. And that is our vision, and that's the vision that we carry. And if you know anything about me, great. And if you don't know anything about me, you might just care to spend 3 minutes on the internet and look up. And you'll see that ever since I was really young, my life has been about service as well. It's been about voluntary service, not getting paid for it. And as a spouse of a politician, I'm still not getting paid for it. So.